Welcome to Fireside Chat with ContainerX, where enterprise infrastructure geeks are the real rock stars. My name is Kiran Committee. I'm the CEO of ContainerX, and today we have with us Terry Warren. He's the president and founder of Advantage24.
Nice to be here.
Nice to meet you, Terry. And thank you for coming all the way from Japan just to meet with us.
Yes, it's my pleasure. Great.
Fireside Chat with ContainerX is a video series where we invite people doing exciting things in the enterprise infrastructure space to our office at ContainerX and have a fun and informative conversation with them. Advantage24 is an up-and-coming regional service provider in Japan with 3 data centers in Japan and more elsewhere. It's like a mini AWS, but they're different in the sense that they handle mission-critical workloads for large multinational healthcare companies, among others. So Terry, tell us about yourself.
So I'm a bit of an oddball. I was born in England, grew up in Australia, and then I've been in Japan for the last 15 years. My background is as a hardware engineer, and I've sort of navigated through the whole internet boom. When the internet didn't exist, it did exist, and then data centers, and so now we're operating the data center infrastructure in Japan.
Awesome. Tell us a bit more about Advantage24.
So Advantage24 is a 8-year-old company. We established it to provide metal as a service to enterprise customers. This predates AWS cloud computing. It's more a managed service provider, but that sort of evolved over the last 8 years.
Right. And how do you position yourself compared to something like an AWS or Azure?
Primarily because of metal, right? Bare metal. So we provide bare metal services. But I think a lot of our enterprise customers are concerned about security and compliance, and so that they need dedicated standalone infrastructure. So our data centers are multi-tenant. They have multiple enterprise customers in them, separated by physical space.
I know you're doing something really exciting with containers, so tell us about your plans for containers.
So we've been using Docker for about 18 months for our own application deployment, and we've realised that this is going to revolutionise how applications are deployed into data centres in the future.
How popular are containers in Japan and Asia-Pac these days?
From a Japan point of view, we're seeing a lot of Docker meetups. We're seeing Japanese engineers trying to actually move their applications across to Docker as an environment. And so it's very active. It's a very active community.
And do you participate in all of those meetups and other events that they have?
Yes, and it's actually part of that which has driven us to as part of these meetups, the developers are looking for environments to start to deploy some of their production code.
Right.
And they're not necessarily thinking that running containers within virtual machines on top of physical machines is the best way of doing it, because they've been running containers locally on their machines, and they really want a production environment for that. Right. And so we're seeing a demand, and hence part of looking at the container management platforms.
Right. And so your plan is to offer a container as a service turnkey solution for your customers then?
Yes, and we actually, probably more than that our plan is to work with ContainerX to offer your solution to customers so that they can do it as a turnkey on our infrastructure, or they can operate it on their own infrastructure.
Got it. And I'm sure before ending up with ContainerX, which we're very happy that you did, you've obviously looked at do-it-yourself approaches, etc. So tell us about that a bit.
Yeah, well, so our internal application development team looked at how to, orchestrate some of the Docker containers, and then we looked at various platforms out there. There was Tutum, which we identified, which was subsequently acquired or consumed by Docker.
The Docker Cloud.
There's now the Docker Cloud product. We looked at Rancher. We looked at Mesos, right? And each of them had benefits, but none of them fitted exactly the requirement we were after, which was focus more on the operational aspects. Rather than most of the other solutions seem to be very well suited for developers, but less well suited for an operational environment. And that's something that we do on an everyday basis. So we wanted a solution which could help us manage Docker containers.
Yeah.
And so ContainerX met that criteria very well.
Yeah. We're really happy and excited that you chose us. What are some of the things about ContainerX that got you excited?
Well, the first was bare metal, bring your own server, right? But that's complemented by supporting AWS, Azure, and existing VMware workloads.
Yeah.
Now, this completely describes our current customers who are using AWS, Azure. They have VMware servers, and we want to provide some bare metal solutions to them as well. So that was a great fit. The second was we've always used a clustering concept of allocating a number of servers into a cluster. So
you would give that cluster per customer, or is that per?
Typically, in our environment, a cluster defines the geographic resources assigned to one customer. So a customer may have multiple clusters. Rarely is it in the same location, but they may have a cluster in Tokyo and they may have a cluster in Sydney, for example. But it represents a group of physical resources.
Right.
And then the second thing, which in regards to the cluster concept, was the idea of being able to run multi-tenants on that cluster. And a tenant can be a team, so dev, UAT, teams, or it could be a type of workload, CRM, some other ERP application. And so the concept of pools really resonated with us. Now, we've had some experience of trying to tag workloads and containers and orchestrate them, but that just became quite complex. And using the ContainerX product, we found it very easy to define a pool as a portion of resource allocation on a cluster and then assign that to users. So the pool idea was very good. And I think the final thing, which is significant for us, is Windows is there. We continue to forget that a significant amount of our infrastructure runs Windows applications. There's Exchange servers, there's back-end file servers, Active Directory, and so having a solution which also allowed the customer to actually manage the Windows platform at the same time as a first-class citizen. Right. Typically in the Docker environment, we're always talking about Linux workloads, right? And so we're very pleased to see that you integrated that in as part of the most recent beta release. Right. Along with LDAP integration, there's just a number of really key components which sort of matched the workload. And when we talk about some of the competitive products, I guess that some of them were a bit slow to integrate those particular components. So that's why we chose ContainerX.
Yeah, so one last question, Terry. What is your advice for people that are trying to do containers as service platforms now?
Don't do it alone, right? Okay. The lesson we learned is we probably spent over 18 months trying different services, evaluating, and the truth of the matter is that there are very capable companies out there building management platforms. Invest in those platforms and get on with deploying your applications and operating your infrastructure, right? It's just... there are some good solutions out there. They're commercial. Adopt them.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much for your time, Terry.
Okay.
Really appreciate it. And on behalf of ContainerX, I look forward to working with you. Thank you for watching Fireside Chat with ContainerX, where enterprise infrastructure geeks are the real rock stars. See you next time.